Hey folks, welcome back. We have a little thing we want to show you today. If you're pulling campers, trailers, boats, anything like that with a tandem axle, and what we mean by tandem is two. So you see two axles there. There's not just a single axle. The big advantage to having a tandem axle is if you get a flat tire on the trailer, you don't have to use a jack. All you need to do is make one of these. This is a Redneck Road Jack here. So all it is a ramp. This is made out of 2x8s. So you want it at least around 8 inches tall. And you can see it's ramped up. It's less than a 45 degree. I'm thinking maybe a 22-degree cut. But all this is 4 2x8 screwed together. Now if you had like a railroad tie you could cut with a chainsaw, that would work, and it's solid. It's less likely to come apart, but this thing's screwed all together, and I use the expanding Gorilla Glue, so it's not going to come apart anytime soon. But solid would be better. And then I just drilled a hole and put a rope through it, so it's like a chalk block. I can carry it around. So all you do is, if you get a flat tire, obviously pull over in a safe location, and preferably with no gravel, because gravel is going to cause you some issues, because our little ramp that we made, our little Redneck Roadside ramp, it's going to roll around on gravel a little bit. It may stick once it digs down in a little bit, but you're better off on solid ground. So say this tire here was flat. What you want to do first is loosen those lug nuts, because they're a lot easier to loosen up if the tire can't spin. So before you do it, loosen your lug nuts up, and then put your ramp over here. And you're going to back up onto that ramp. If this was your flat tire, you'd put your ramp here and you'd pull forward onto that ramp. And we'll show you what that looks like. So it's just that easy. You don't need to whip out the jack and crawl underneath there and jack things up. You could literally change a tire in 5 minutes. It's pretty sweet. Farmers have been doing this stuff for years. That's where I learned how to do it, out on the farm. We used to always have one of these in the back of the truck. The real nice thing now too is you can get those cordless tools like DeWalt and Ryobi and what's the blue brand? Cobalt. You can get those wireless, not wireless, but cordless impact drivers, and make sure you have the right socket with you to carry around with you. And that's like NASCAR. You'll have that tire changed in 2 minutes and back on the road. But make sure you go fix your tire and don't go without a spare. And make sure you have a spare, because I've seen a lot of people that don't carry a spare. On our trailer I made a rack to hold my spare. It's just welded right onto the tongue, and I always have a spare with me no matter what trailer I'm pulling. Now the other thing you need to think about, because I've seen a lot of people stranded out in the middle of nowhere and didn't know this little clue, your trailer lug nuts are generally not the same size as your vehicle lug nuts. So if you're thinking that you're going to be able to use the equipment, the jack and all that off of your vehicle, the jack may work, but when you go to take your lug nuts off, your wrench is not going to fit. So make sure you have a wrench that fits. Most people just buy those T-handle wrenches that you get at the auto parts store. It's got 4 different size sockets on the end, and those work good too, because you can get kind of double torque when you're taking the nuts on and off. You can push and pull at the same time on that T-handle, and it's a lot easier to break those loose. So make sure you have a lug wrench that works. Now you folks with the single axle trailers, you're not completely out of luck here. They do make a device that you can put on the axle and roll your truck either forward or backwards, and that device rolls up underneath your axle and picks your tire up off the ground. You just have to buy that. It's not something that you're going to manufacture unless you got a crazy cool shop with all those sweet tools. But you'll definitely want to build one of these things. Throw it in the back of your truck when you're traveling. It saves so much headache if you have one of these. I highly recommend building one or getting a hold of one. So for your benefit, if you haven't pulled a lot of trailers, I'm going to go over some pre-flight stuff, as I might call it, that you'll want to check out. Not everybody has pulled trailers as much as I have, being a farmer's kid. So let's start up here at the tongue. Always make sure that you have a block of wood that you can put underneath your jack, because you're not always going to be on level ground when you need to take that trailer loose, and if you can't get enough height on that, you're not going to be able to come off of your ball. So always throw in a wooden block that you can put underneath your jack. When you do your safety chains, in a lot of states it's state law now, you have to crisscross your chains. So your chain from that side of the tongue goes to the hook on this side, and your chain from this side of the tongue goes to the hook on the other side. Now the reason you want to do that, if you look down on the chains here, if for some reason your coupler is not locked and you're just sitting on top and you hit a bump and that comes off, it's going to go down and rest on those chains instead of gouging, dragging on the pavement. And it's a whole lot safer, and it'll keep things a lot more stable going down the road. Our next little tip is your light plug. Run it through your safety pin latch on your hitch. That always keeps it center ball, so it's not going to pull left or right. It's just going to pivot right here. That's another good tip. Now, this is always in question with people. I bought one of these coiled breakaway cables. You'll see that these things are always dragging the ground. It screws them up, cuts them in half, and when they fall off, they don't work no more. And what this does, there's a battery down in here. So if for some reason your trailer breaks away, it pulls this pin out, creating a connection in here, and sends juice from this battery back to your brakes and locks your trailer brakes up. And that's what that function's for. So always make sure you got voltage in your battery. When you're plugged in, it should feed that battery. Unfortunately, people don't use their trailers enough, and that battery sometimes goes dead or discharges or goes bad. Also, your breakaway cable is not supposed to be attached to your chain. It's got to be attached separately than your chain. If it's just attached to the chain, if your chains break away, the plug goes with it, and your trailer doesn't stop. It can go into oncoming traffic and kill somebody, and you don't want to do that. So make sure it has its own connection on the hook. Don't hook it to your chain. Your light plug. There's a little catch on your light plug flap that goes up underneath the catch on your light plug, and they should be locked in together. You can look at that down there. You can see, let's get a better look. See those two catches right there? And one goes behind the other and locks your plug in. Make sure that's locked. Okay, now that you got your light plug in, we're going to check our lights. So turn your lights on. Okay, we got our lights on. You're going to check your marker lights. All of our marker lights are working. Tail lights are working. License plate lights working. And marker lights on this side are working. So now we're going to check our turn signals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my flashers on. Now on American-made vehicles, your brake light, most of them, your brake light and your turn signal is going to use the same bulb. So you can see the brighter bulbs are flashing, so I know those bulbs are working and the wires are connected. Now if you have a foreign vehicle, sometimes they use more wires and they use different bulbs for your brake and your turn signals. But you should be able to check it just by turning the flashers on. So that's how you check your lights. So after you've checked all that, step back, make sure there's nothing dragging on the ground. If for some reason your vehicle sits too low and your chains are dragging the ground, just disconnect your chain, twist the chain, make it bind up a little bit on itself, and it'll come up off the ground and kind of shorten, and then reclip it. Just make sure you got enough play to when you're making your turns, you're not pulling your chains tight. So let's move on down the line to our tires. The most common failure pulling trailers and roadside issues is flat tires on your trailer. And the biggest cause for flat tires is these trailers sit for a long time and the air bleeds down in the tires to where they're below pressure. And as they roll on the road, they flex. As they hit the ground, they mushroom out, and they come back around, they flex back out, and then they mushroom out again, and over and over and over, and that tire heats up. Because if you bend and flex something enough times, it's going to break. Just like a piece of wire, when you bend it a bunch of times, it'll break because the molecules heat up and it eventually fails. And that's what happens to your tires. So always make sure that you have the correct pressure in your tires. That's very, very important. The other thing is you want to check your wheel bearings. So either get a jack and jack up each axle on both sides, and you're going to check your play in your wheel bearings, see if you have any. If you don't have a jack, you can use our little tool that we made. So one at a time, take an axle off the ground or a tire off the ground. You want to grab both sides of the tire and push it in and out. You shouldn't feel a lot of play. You may feel a little bit, like maybe a 1/16 of an inch or something. You'll feel it bump around a little bit. That's not a problem. That's close enough. But if you feel a bunch of play, or if you spin that tire and you hear some grinding noises or something like that, you got wheel bearing issues, and you do not want to go on a trip like that, because you're going to be on the side of the road for a very long time. And if you screw that spindle up, you're going to stay on the side of the road, and they're going to have to put your trailer on a wrecker or something and haul it off. So do not go there. So check your wheel bearings. If you do, if there is some play in those things, get your bearings changed. Now in my experience, it's cheaper just to buy the whole hub kit now than it is to buy the bearings, the races, the grease seal, and all that stuff. Just buy the whole kit. So what you do is take a rubber hammer, hit the side of that little cap right there. Take your tire off first. Hit the side of that little cap, and that cap will pop off. And there's a nut in there that's got a cotter pin through it. Straighten out that cotter pin, pull the cotter pin out. That nut will spin off, and then your hub will come off. You should have a bearing on the outside that'll pretty much fall out in your hand. There's going to be a washer with it, and then the whole thing will come off. The inside bearing is held on by the grease seal. Changing the bearings and all that is not for this video. That's the whole video in itself. But get your HUD kit. They come pre-lubricated. Make sure there's no metal shavings or anything in on your spindle. Get some brake clean if you have to, and clean those off and wipe it off with a rag. And your new hub kit will slide right on there. You'll have an outer bearing that you slide on there. You'll have a washer most of the time with a little flat spot that you line up, and the washer holds the bearing in. You put your nut back on, and you spin the tire. You move the tire back and forth until you don't have any play at all, and make sure your tire's spinning freely. You don't want to get them too tight. A bearing that's too tight is just as bad as one that's going out. So just snug it up to where you don't have any play. The wheel spins freely, and then put your cotter pin back through the slot in that nut. Bend up the end of it so it doesn't fall out, and put your cap back on. Some people will fill that cap full of grease before they put it back on. Get your rubber hammer, and that's just friction that holds that cap on. It doesn't screw on or anything like that. You just tap it on with your rubber mallet or a dead blow hammer or something like that. But do that with all 4 wheels. Check them out. Make sure all of your doors are latched securely. If you don't have a lock on here, just put a little pin through there, like that's up in your hitch or something, with some same kind of pin, just to keep things from opening up going down the road and stringing your belongings all over the place. Make sure your water's filled up. Make sure all of your switches and everything are off inside your trailer. And that's what you're doing. So by that time, you're pretty much race ready to go if you've checked all those things. Next thing we're going to go over is checking your brakes. You want to make sure your brakes are actually braking, or make sure they're not braking too hard. So what you're going to do is you come up here. If you got trailer brakes on your trailers, not all of them have them, but usually a tandem axle trailer will have them. Sometimes they're not on both axles. Sometimes only one axle will have brakes, but this trailer, both axles have brakes, and they'll be on all 4 hubs. So your trucks sometimes will have a built-in brake controller. It'll be somewhere on the dash. On the Chevys, they're up in here where this little cubby is. But if your truck doesn't come factory with one, they can't put one in here. You have to go with an aftermarket, because the computer that they have in your vehicle is not the right one for the built-in brake controller. So tell your dealer, if you're buying a truck and you don't have a brake controller and you're going to be pulling trailers, they'll add that for you at a nominal cost. It's not much, maybe $100. But the aftermarket brake controllers, you'll see there's a wheel here on top. That's how you adjust the current going back to your brakes. And this is your manual actuator. Your brakes will actuate with your pedal as you brake, but if you ever want to do your brakes, apply your brakes without applying the truck brakes, this is how you would do it. And that's how you check your brakes. So get on flat ground, put your vehicle in drive, start rolling forward, take your foot off the gas, you're still rolling, manually activate your trailer brakes, and you should get a pull, a nice even pull until you stop. If your trailer locks up and comes to an abrupt stop, you want to back off on that wheel a little bit. If you don't feel anything at all, you need to turn that wheel up a little bit until you feel it, so you get a nice even stop where it'll take your pickup and stop your pickup to a complete stop without skidding the trailer. Now, your built-in controllers on other vehicles, they may be down here, they may be over there. You adjust those through the buttons on your steering wheel. You just have to go to that function on your display, and you should hit the up and down button to be able to adjust your brakes. But that's how you do it. Make sure you're squared away before you leave, because like out here in the Midwest, there's hundreds of miles in between towns sometimes, and you don't want to be stuck out there on the side of the road. Make sure you have the stuff to help yourself. I carry this black box in the back of my truck. I got it locked in there with a cable, but I got my tire chains in there. I got my T-bar for changing my lug nuts on my trailer. I got a pair of coveralls in there. I got gloves in there. I got a flashlight in there, and one of those handheld 12-volt lights that you could plug in a cigarette lighter, searchlight, spotlight kind of thing. But just about everything I need in there. There's bungee straps in there. You can keep ratchet straps in there. I have the big ratchet straps in there. I have a bag full of the little ratchet straps like these, but they don't fit in there. I keep them in the truck, but I keep a whole bag of those. You never know when you're going to have to tie something down. So be able to help yourself out on the road. And I hope I've covered just about everything you need to know. I think just those basics right there will take you a long ways, and probably keep you from sitting on the side of the road for hours and hours and hours. And if you haven't pulled a trailer a lot, those are the things you need to check out on your walk around. So until next time, here on Mark Kelly Farms, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Drive safe, travel safe, and come back and see us.